This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For June 18th, 2021, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another podcast adventure with the AV SuperFriends. If it's a Friday afternoon, we're trying to do a show. Though you guys don't really get to hear this until Wednesday, Thursday. But it's Friday here, so
they're all listening on
with
Friday.
us.
They all wait because they want it to be relevant.
Yes, wait until the following Friday.
And then they play it.
Or fire up your time machines, make your stand-up desk go 88 miles an hour, go back in time, listen to it live. My name's Chris Dector. I'm joined today by Larry, Mark, Jamie, and Justin. Rachel is currently stuck in traffic somewhere in the Metro DC area.
The best place to be stuck in.
She's been there for 4 days, so I don't think it's going to.
It's one of the worst places ever.
Yeah.
Send peanut butter sandwiches.
No. It is routinely identified as as having some of the worst traffic in the country, and she is trying to transit it at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. So good luck with that. So, on today's show, we're going to discuss naming a higher ed AV department in 2021 and what that name should look like. And we're also going to discuss giving power to the people, so to speak. But first, let's do a little AV news. So, a couple weeks ago was ISE. Actually, well, it's going on still this week. The ISE London is this week. 2 weeks ago was ISE Barcelona. So, Commercial Integrator and CE Pro released their list of what they call their top new technologies, or technology winners. And so I have this little listicle of an article here, and wanted to bring this up because a couple of things caught my eye. There's some strange choices in here. There's some ones that make perfect sense and are common, and there's other ones that are clearly just from the usual suspects. But there's some strange things, especially now, kind of considering where we are in 2021. The first one on the list and I'm not going to go into any brand names or anything in particular on these, but it's a kind of a what do you call it, a lobby greeting system. You can do a little video conference and a little touchpad to log in or whatever. It just seems like an odd choice because that was a flash in the pan like technology that existed for about 4 seconds last summer. And then everyone kind of moved past it and said, we don't want to deal with that because someone has to operate, man, and maintain that stuff.
Whose job is that? It's not mine.
We're still looking at it, that virtual assistant stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it comes up a lot, but no one wants to actually run that stuff because it takes actual work. So
we had the meeting, and you know what it got replaced with? A phone.
A person or a phone.
Thing you pick up.
We are using a phone as a virtual receptionist.
We actually did it a couple of years ago. We did it a couple of years ago. This looks cool. It's like an all-integrated thing. But a couple of years ago, our student services had kiosks because they were all in the administration building, which was completely across campus. Now, it's not a giant campus, right? But in the student center, they had 3 PC kiosks, webcams, and microphones in these little cubicle things. And you just walked up and you hit, at the time it was Jabber, it's now Zoom or something. You just hit the button and it auto-connected you to one of those people. And so it was that little virtual conference thing, and that was before all the new touchless and social distance things. And so it was really a unique and fun idea. But the students, because our campus isn't giant, it's 3 blocks maybe to walk from one building to the other. The students just kind of didn't use it because it was just easier to go over there.
Right.
But I thought it was a novel idea and has a lot of purpose for that kind of convenience factor. But I don't know about this thing was being sold as the replacement for the receptionist.
It's pretty popular overseas. There's tons of solutions out there for this stuff.
Well, I think overseas it makes sense because you have people doing multiple languages. So somebody can come up and you don't know do they need French, German, Spanish, you don't know. But
and it's a resource thing. One person can manage multiple offices at the same time.
So that's your job now, Justin, is you have to run 15 different buildings and use 6 different languages, and you just connect to the car and tell people where they're going. Yeah.
I'll just build a robot to do it.
The only thing about this one that kind of bugs me is if they're marketing it as a social distance safety thing, it's a touch screen. You still have all these people touching the screen.
Are we back to cleaning touch screens again?
We're not back to cleaning touch screens because that's been proven several times that was never a thing and people just panicked about it.
It is a thing now. Number 1 on the list.
Apparently.
Oh,
yeah. So I'm going to click through some of these pretty quickly here. The next one is Biamp's little Devio's kind of all grown up, which I like. This has been, in fact...
It's all grown up and sleek. It grew down.
Well, they did. So one of my gripes, I like the Devio system. One of my gripes is it was in a plastic case, not a metal case. It was not rack mountable. It didn't have the right analog I/O and digital I/O. They fixed some of that, but clearly this is being positioned as somewhere between the existing Devio line and the what's the next one up, the Tessero Forte line. Mm-hmm. This sits firmly in between. It's not replacing either of those, so it's kind of an odd choice. But I do like that they're making a big deal about their auto shoot feature where you hit the button, it fires up the room, and so it's a great way to just deploy these from an IT perspective. So this is something you can hand off to an IT department. Say, set this stuff up according to the instructions, push this button, and get out of the room, and it's done.
I'm really excited about this one, except for it looks like it should be half rack mountable, and that's the only thing that's kicking.
It's half rack sized, yes, thank you.
It's half rack sized. Just put some ears on it and make it go.
Yeah.
So the best part about this is
Live for professionals.
The best part about this is they don't say network switch anywhere on it, right? So you can buy it and hide it from your IT group.
I believe
it does have a whole lot of network ports on it.
Something.
Yeah, it has
That's all it is, right? Network ports.
Yeah, it's all. Yeah,
control and everything.
They're very deliberate about that, calling it an audio expander, I believe is the term. So it's just a network switch, but yeah. So moving on, the next one they have up on here is they're talking about microphones. I'm going to blow past this one real quick, but they're just showing here is a very standard 2x2 ceiling tile grid microphone array. We know there's lots of these out there. What I thought was weird is they picked one from the company who used to do AV and apparently now is a legal firm that also occasionally is involved in AV. So I don't know. I mean, I like the concept of these, but and I've used many of them from other manufacturers. This was a weird choice, and I'm sure they almost did it for legal reasons. They didn't get sued.
I think really the thing that was strange on here is there's stuff that was like, this is supposed to be the new, right? Mm-hmm. New technology. And there's things on here that have been available for several years. Or have the next one version.
So the next one is just Crestron's new touchscreens. I'm like, okay, great. Mm-hmm. That's like their last one, except now they're annoyingly in distinct SKUs and form factor, so you can't just change out the back and use it in a different place. Now you have to buy a different one. So, yeah,
I would just like to.
Choices.
I think like articles like this or these kind of award things, two things. One, unrelated, don't make it clickbait. Like this stupid slideshow so you can sell more ads. Come on. Are we past that? This is supposedly a professional application. Second, like there was no description of this is what we were looking for. And this is, it's just kind of like, bam, here's a list.
If you go to that full, there was a link on the first, and I'll put this link in the episode description for everybody, but I believe it was on that first page, buried in like the third paragraph. It does actually go to the ISE page talking about the top new technology awards, and I think they may go into a little bit more there, but it's super comprehensive because there's like every possible thing they're looking at, including thermostats and all sorts of stuff.
So it's like 4 clicks down, and I just didn't get that far.
It's hidden in the text of a
okay.
Paragraph.
Well, my bad. I hate awards that come out like this and they don't like define.
No, I agree. Like I said, there's some weird
is.
choices, and we won't go through the whole thing here. But there's like, for example, they bring up Crestron NVX. They say, "Hey, the new NVX, it's the best thing since the last NVX." I'm like, "Yeah, except you removed one of the HDMI ports." What the heck? Smaller. So,
and isn't this Shure microphone they listed? Isn't that just the STEM Audio one that they rebranded?
No. So this Shure microphone, I was going to say, I did want to bring this one up. This is their new 710 line array, which is their baby brother to the 910. This is actually a really solid mic. What amuses me the most about this line is if you go to their product page and you look at it, they will sell you a blank empty case. There's an actual accessory that is a blank empty case for this microphone. It's like $100. That is literally a carbon copy of the mic, but with no guts, no power, nothing, purely for aesthetics. So you can mount them vertically on the side of a display and have, or top and bottom. So you have like your soundbar microphone or whatever, but that gives you a visually appealing and matching aesthetic layout for your 2 microphone bars. So
interesting.
Yeah, but it is the STEM thing, isn't it?
No.
Isn't this the STEM Audio had this, didn't it?
Not
before Shure bought them?
No, Sure had this. We saw this in beta a while ago. Yeah, we had to sign NDAs, and they came out about probably two and a half years ago when they were working on this.
Because when you go to the page, it says STEM ecosystem.
No, it's all integrated through that same
so when Sure bought STEM, the idea is they can take that kind of lightweight version. I think what they're going to position STEM as, because they're using that name still, they're going to position it as like Sure Light for those IT departments. Buy these 8 things and your room is done, sort of thing.
All right. I looked
at
it. I thought I recalled that it being part of STEM's availability before they were purchased. Like,
no, they may have something similar, but because Phoenix Audio, STEM's other,
because it was that Condor thing from them.
They had all the similar form factors, but no, this one is a Sure product. Okay. But one thing I do like about this one, speaking of 2x2s, is they make this in a 2-foot long length, which they make a 2 and a 4, I think, or maybe it's a 2, 4, and a 6. I don't remember, but they make it as a 2, which you can drop right in the middle of a ceiling tile and just have this tiny little thing, and you can turn off the lights, and people don't even know it's there. But you didn't have to like replace a ceiling tile with a $4,000 microarray sort of thing. So for smaller rooms, it's pretty slick. So anyway, there's just some interesting things here. Like I said, I'll put the link in the episode description. I did find that some of the choices were strange. Like, hey, here's a phone from Crestron. I'm like, okay. I mean, I guess that's important to somebody, but
somebody's doing that. Somebody's making money selling those and putting them in.
Yeah, or here's the newest screen from Daylight. I'm like, well, that's cool. Daylight makes good screens, but here's another one. So yeah, it's a weird selection of, and like you said, Jamie, it's clickbait because they want you to go through, or not clickbait. Mm-hmm. That's not the right term. They want to get as many clicks out of you as possible. So now they get 25 clicks where 1 would usually suffice.
There was nothing on this list that was like, this is the latest, greatest, groundbreaking. You need to change everything you're doing with your spaces to make sure you adopt this thing. Like, I don't see any of that on.
Yeah, and especially positioning it as top new technologies. And we mentioned a minute ago, like, well, these things have all, in one way or one shape or form or one way or another, they've been around before. None of these were like,
part of the problem is here? They don't have a new category either. Like, all this stuff is the same thing, rinse, repeat, right? Oh, the best whiteboard, the best audio conferencing components. I mean, that's the same thing over and over every year.
Maybe they just need to give out, like, just the cool shit award.
Yeah.
Right? Nice. I might actually pay more attention to that. Hey, this is cool. Yeah.
Well, I think...
What's a cool projector? This is a cool projector. It's nothing new, nothing groundbreaking.
Was 100% valid to say, hey, like, let me know what your criteria are for this, because I might start paying attention to the one that's just called microphones. Oh, yeah, it's a microphone. But if you tell me why, right, you're looking at these microphones, why this microphone won, that may be more interesting to me, and I may pay more attention to it. So
best black box with a Cat 5 connector award goes to
best thing that does stuff.
Black box.
Goes to from Black
Surprisingly,
box.
They haven't won any awards. I'm not really sure what happens.
Weird.
I don't get it.
Anyway, links in there if you guys want to take a look. So basically, it's stuff that was announced at ISE, which would normally, this would be the time when we see stuff being announced at Infocom. So we'll see what comes out at Infocom in a couple of months, and we'll have probably a similar article to this about the newest, best stuff from Infocom, which is everything on this list, either made by somebody else or just one version newer.
They'll have an AMX phone on there next time.
Different number. 1 digit higher.
So, all right. Well, not to belabor that. Mark, push the commercial button.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's the AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
All right, so first topic today is one that's been kind of on my mind recently. I know, Justin, you've been working on something similar. Is kind of like, what is our department called? Our department at our universities. What's our AV department, or whatever we call it? What is that called, and what should it be called in 2021? A lot of what we've been discussing over the last, how long have we been doing this? 8 months? Has been a reflection of identifying that we absolutely need to not just be talking about widgets and cabling and encoding and that sort of thing, but we need to keep in mind the larger aspects of everything involved in a teaching and learning space, and the pedagogy side of things, and the student experience and the instructor experience. All these things all come together in a holistic sense to kind of inform what we do, or at least I sure as heck hope it does. So what I want to do right now is I pulled a bunch of these off of recent, you go look at through job listings of things, and you see a bunch of different departmental names. And I want to rattle through a bunch of these as quickly as we can, and then we'll come back and discuss some of them. But so there's about 25 here. Well, there's 31 on my list, but some of them are, there's a lot of kind of ones that are very similar.
There's overlap, yeah.
There's a lot of overlap here. So I'll just run through them. And I was going to say, in no particular order, but these are in a very particular order. These are in alphabetical order because it's easy.
As fast as you can.
Not quite as fast as I can, but all right. So we've got academic technology and media services, audio-visual educational technology and media services. That one's a mouthful. Audio-visual and systems technology, AV and event services, AV operations, AV services or audiovisual services. That's currently Justin's department name. AV solutions, audio video services and engineering. Then we get into the ever popular classroom support services, classroom technology and media, classroom technology services, classroom technology support, classrooms, digital media and events. Those are all our classroom ones there. I'm sorry. We got one more coming up here. Two more coming up. Collaboration and classroom technologies, desktop and classroom technology. I think we're done with classrooms. Nope, there's at least two more down the bottom. Then we go into instructional AV, instructional technology, interactive video services, learning and technology services, learning environments, learning experience and technology. That one's kind of cool. Learning spaces. That's the current department name at IU. Media services or media services technology. I've seen a lot of that. Media productions and audiovisual services. Multimedia classrooms. Office of Classroom Management. Teaching and learning technologies. Technology management services. Technology support services. And video communication services. So my guess is for everybody listening right now, your department was either in that list or very close, like change one word and that's your department name sort of thing. So I think we've all kind of covered about every possible facet of...
And there's 6 of you who are just saying, I'm just part of the library and we're sorry.
and there are people who are in strange spots kind of outside of IT or the library or wherever you might be. I mean, I know there's groups who are still kind of under the provost's office or something. So we're kind of all over the place. But what I'd like to do is just kind of see what makes sense out of these lists. What did we like? What do you not like? But what do you guys think of this? These about 30 names in here with the overlaps seems to cover the vast majority. But as you can tell, we're kind of it's all over the place. But we're all doing basically the same thing.
When you read the list, you're at different zoom in, zoom out levels. You have like large scale departments, then you have the minutia underneath those large scale departments, and you covered a vast array of all of that. And I think
you could almost do an org chart with just some of those names.
Yeah.
And what's funny is some of it actually is reliant upon what other departments at your universities are called. Like with the learning spaces and learning environments, you can step on toes if you start calling yourself that, at least at our university.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the problem. We were, 10 years ago, interactive video services. Not going to get into that, but now we're audio video services.
Well, but you can see that natural progression, interactive video, because you were doing distance ed and stuff, and now I'm moving to AV. But AV, are you AV services or AV solutions? AV services?
Audio visual services or AV services, one of the two. Yeah. Well, so now we're trying to rebrand to something else. So we do, AV across the whole campus, academic or not academic. But because the mission statement of the university is, the student experience and retention now, keeping your students here, we find that it might be more beneficial to us to realign with classroom technology, specifically in education, even though that's not everything that we do. So I've noticed some people are, merging from a specific classroom technology name to more of a broader name, but there's different reasons why and cultural things. So we're right in the middle of it. We haven't found a good answer yet.
When does it matter? And here's why. Here's why I asked that question. Because for us, like my department is classroom technologies, right? Services.
Makes sense.
But nobody really knows who we are by that name. Because years and years ago, the classroom was identified as the ideal learning environment, ILE. And then, so they did it. So now everybody on campus just refers to us as the ILE people.
But even though that's not your department name.
Yeah, that's not the department name. And it's nowhere close. So when they go look things up on the website and things, we get a lot of tickets sent to the help desk, because we have one master help desk for technology. And they're like, hey, we're looking for the ILE people. And we'll say, well, that was Classroom Technologies. Oh, yeah? We had no idea that was even an apartment. And so that goes my question. When does it really, well, but how do you, and we've talked about this in the show in the past, like if you call it, Solstice all the time, or Apple or AirPlay, AirPlay, and then you get something different, and now it's Google Cast. Everybody's still going to keep calling it AirPlay.
It's the Kleenex thing, right? You get that Kleenex problem.
So, Jamie, I think to answer your question, you answered your own question by asking it. When does it matter? And it matters, in my opinion anyway, and you guys, correct me on this, but it matters in that I think there's a disconnect for a lot of these between the name of the department and the actual service or solution provided. Like, for example, my department is learning spaces, which, just like you're saying, is classroom technology. So it's, we build academic spaces. Justin, you just mentioned you're thinking about going back to classrooms because it's probably more accurately reflecting what your department does. Whereas a lot of what I do, or the vast majority of what I do, is non-academic spaces.
Exactly.
So now it's kind of weird to say I'm asking the learning spaces people to help me build an esports arena, or to design my event space,
conference room,
or to build my conference room. Why am I talking to the classroom group about my conference rooms? So I think, Jamie, I think that's when it matters, is that disconnect between like potential clients and departments on campus, the larger campus community, and the service that they're looking for. So you've got that ILE, ideal learning environment, but people are like, well, I don't see that. I see CTS. Is that the same thing?
Dude, to kind of play a devil's advocate for that, though, we are classroom technology here at UNCG. And just like everybody else, we are book solid this summer. I've been able to use our name, and the fact that our name so closely reflects our mission statement, just like Justin was saying, to be able to either outsource conference rooms, jobs we don't have time for, or just say we can get to you in the fall. But right now, classroom technology has to be focused on the classroom and student experience. And I think in that scenario, the name kind of helps.
No, I think you're right, Larry. I think in that alignment, there's kind of a couple of different things I see at play here. One is kind of what is the client side experience of this, and if they were looking for an answer to X, Y, or Z, are you named accordingly where you can be located via your website, right? And so you would hope that whatever they were to go search and query would come back and get somewhere close to where you are in your organization. But I do think that there's kind of a current that's happening where you're seeing rebranding, renames, because we don't want to create these micro silos, right? And so that you have, if I named everything AV this, AV that, we're all kind of keenly aware that there's this merger in IT, and if we're sticking everything with an AV name, we don't meet that IT kind of category. And I think everywhere across the board, we're trying to move away from things that are AV lingo and language centric and make ourselves more IT, UIT kind of centric, so that we're under that umbrella. Because I think a lot of movement is to be more closely aligned with the IT service providers on your campus. And so we start looking at the staff side of that. That's where a lot of this gets tricky, because we're trying to bring up pays and job descriptions and things like that to align with IT standards, and not just leave somebody out like, oh, you're the HDMI cable wrangler. But if you look at IT side, if they did the same thing we did 10 years ago, they'd all just be KVM people, right? So they do keyboards, mice, and displays, and that's obviously not what they do. So why do we kind of strap ourselves by saying we only do AV? And like, we do a lot more than that. So I think there's pressures there to kind of find a better way to align that so that we can be a part of that IT organization.
Yeah, and what's funny is that you say that. Most of the time when we show up somewhere to a client's office, they look at us and go, oh, here comes the IT people. And everybody to them is just an IT person. They don't really know.
There is that aspect, yeah, absolutely.
Help me with my email.
What am I there to do, or what's going on? They just see my face. No, what's broke now? Are you here to fix my printer? It's like, no, I am not.
But there's power in that, and kind of going back to what you said, Larry, that when you are aligned with that student experience, and your name is that way, like you can part a lot of C's sometimes. Like, oh, this is in the mission statement, and it's about this student experience. We need to get this done. It becomes a priority, right? And so trying to align with something that's related directly to the mission statement with teaching and learning and spaces that affect students, like where you want to go. Like, that's how you actually get funding.
And as a department as a whole, kind of like what Chris said earlier, and I'm the same boat, right? I work for Classroom Technology Services, but my job duty is probably only 40% classrooms. But the department as a whole falls within that 80-20, right? 80% of their workday has everything to do with classrooms. And the other 20% is the other stuff. I'm the outlier. Out of 12 people, I'm the outlier. And as a whole, it's there. I'll tell you personally, the only time I ever really run into an issue with like what my department is named is when I'm dealing with consultants or integrators. Because they see classroom technology, they don't see like AV design, they don't see, but as far as within the school itself, we have a different branding issue that I brought up earlier. But it is interesting about the job search deal. Because how do you align? Let's combine what Chris and Mark said, right? Chris started this whole thing. Like, I've been looking, I looked at some of the job posting boards. We looked internally. We've just been kind of doing this mass unofficial study. And then Mark's like, well, we want to be more ubiquitous. We want to be aligned. But how do you know when you fit into the IT or what we would consider, even if it's desktop support, when do you fit within that scope and when do you fit within AV? Because let's face it, job descriptions is a whole nother show. Most of them, but how do you, that's, I guess, is where the other version of this, what's your department called, fit, because I've read so many job description where it looks like it could be for me, but it's not, right? You call them up and they're like, no, you're not really an AV technician. You have to go make sure
computers.
That, yeah. Can you run Zoom? Well,
we might click a button. Yeah, I could do that.
That's not what I'm applying for.
But you're right, Jamie. There are places that like Zoom. Well, you use Zoom in the classroom. So Zoom is now, in some schools, Zoom is owned by the Classroom Technology Department, the AV department.
That's us.
And their Zoom admin is in that group. When, to Mark's point, you could argue that, no, that's a enterprise level system administrator position. You need to have somebody who's got that level of horsepower running a mission critical system like that. But it used to exist because of video conferencing. That's classrooms, right? That's the same guys. So.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense for what Mark was saying too, because like if Justin, if that's his gig at WKU, is that system admin for Zoom rooms, he should be paid like a system admin, and they're usually paid better than us.
No, some that's of these another show in itself too.
Yeah, let's not. I know. I want to stay out of that one.
Yeah.
No, and I'm not trying to get into that. It's just more along back to what Mark was saying: is where do we fall in this structure? Because it is really hard to start finding and parsing out where in the hierarchy of salaries you belong. Are you just a VCR cart pusher, or are you a system admin? What are you?
And I think a lot of it comes back to that name of that group. So when you go to contact that group, do you just need those people to push? Hey, I need someone to go set up these 60 millimeter film projectors over in the following classrooms at 11 o'clock. Are you calling AV services for that? Or I need someone to come over and consult with me about the acoustics in my new multi-purpose space.
Right. You're hinting on it, Chris, perfectly, where it's, does your organization align themselves as labor, or do they align themselves as knowledge? And I think it's important to think about that because it directly goes to what you're saying, Jamie, about pay scale and people. And then universities are places of knowledge, right? And so the more we can align with, you're calling me because I'm knowledgeable, and you're not necessarily calling me because you need me to turn a screw. They're two different things. And if all of your people are identified as just laborers, they will be paid as just laborers. Whereas if they're identified as information specialists of some level, they will be in a different category of pay and seen differently on the university.
So the other thing I did on part of this, and you're 100% right there, Mark, and maybe to put a finer point on it, the other thing I did is I created this, who else is in here? It looks like Larry's looking at it at least. At the second page down from my giant list of department names is I created what I it's a chart with, not a chart, it's two lists here, but of good terms and bad terms, which is probably not fair, but I would say terms that are probably more accurate to the things we do. And Mark, to your point about like branding yourself or positioning yourself in such a way that it you have a different reputation just based on name alone at your institution, and then terms that I would consider bad terms or terms I think maybe are outdated. So, for example, under the good terms or maybe the modern terms or the terms you should be looking at, I think anyway, these ones just caught my eye, and so happy to hear from you guys on this. But so my thought was here, this is for the type of terms that should be in 2021 should be included in the name of a department. Technology, I think that's critical because so much of what we do is technology. We're not just moving carts around, and so I think outdated terms like media services, that's such a vague term. I mean, Jamie, you were mentioning before, how the heck do you find stuff like that? Media services means something different to everybody at every school. So, and there's no technology in there. So some have just gone media services technology and stuck that on the end. But because we're part of IT, we do as much IT as anybody. We talked about that a couple of shows ago. I think the term technology or something like that needs to be part of that. If it's not in the title, it needs to be in the mission statement or something. So the next one, I lumped all these together because they're all very similar, but learning or educational or academic or instructional. And Larry, you brought this up. You're saying, hey, we can use this actually as a bit of project management to say, we can't do you because we are, academic classroom technologies. We have to build, we have to prioritize building spaces for academic spaces. We can't come to your conference room. So here's the number of a local integrator. Please work with them. And we're good partners with them, et cetera, et cetera.
It's slippery, though. It's a slippery slope because
It's
you
a
make the
slippery
argument
slope.
that
You can't
teaching
do
and
it.
learning can happen in any space on campus. It's not confined to the four walls of a classroom. So we've used both sides of this. I'm guilty. Like I use it when we're strapped and we don't have any time. But it's like somebody comes to us in a downtime. It's like, yeah, we can do that. You can make a justification that learning's happening there. We'll help you out.
And that's where I think we need to find that balance between saying, hey, we're at an educational institution. And, Justin, you were talking about this. We're an educational institution, but so much of what we do is functionally AV consulting and AV design for non-academic spaces, but how do we balance that to say that we need to prioritize the one, because that's our mission. That's why we're all here. Right. Your conference room is not an academic space, but your conference room wouldn't exist if we didn't have these umpteen thousand students running around all here to learn.
And we're here to help the whole university. And, to your point, the football offices on our campus are classrooms. So each individual coach has their projector, has a TV.
Students.
It's all, and they're, 15, 20 seats for that, and they're training and they're teaching those student athletes something. Now, obviously, it's not
with
an
magic
official
projectors
classroom,
with no MAC addresses.
But there is really no difference in how I approach those rooms than other generic classrooms.
Well, and that's exactly right. It's no difference to us, but it's difference to them. So go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. When I said that, the only real difference or priority I put is the 3 months of summer when we are as slammed as we can possibly be with classroom projects. The rest of the time, learning spaces, I love that term because there are formal learning spaces, there are informal learning spaces all over campus, and those can be conference room, huddle spaces.
Yeah. That kind of gives you the blank check to go wherever you want and work because
anywhere. It's just...
So let me ask this question.
You guys learning in here? Get out of here. It's my space.
So if somebody comes to you on day one and says, I need a new DirectView LED in the football stadium club, and then 2 weeks later, somebody comes to you and says, I need 10 classrooms built, because we do first in, first out. So we already got them on the books. We're already ordering equipment.
No, that's all about prioritization.
It's too late to schedule those classrooms because... what we've done is trying to commit or create these committees to help other people decide these things for us, because we don't want to decide that.
You need a replacement cycle. The replacement cycle decides that for you.
That doesn't exist
Because
here.
then,
replacement cycles, and there's capital projects, and all that stuff is on somebody's calendar. If you're getting blindsided with it due 6 months from now, somebody didn't do their job prior.
Yeah.
So that's the issue we have is we try to prioritize classrooms, but first in, first out.
You should know what you're doing for the next 12 months or have a really good idea.
Like I can tell you next summer
we have a good
which
idea.
rooms I'm doing. There might be some additionals added, but
It's classroom, conference room, this.
Yeah, but that classroom space, if you are aligned with like Larry, learning spaces or something like that will become your priority marker, right? So those are the things that we're going to deal with first. With excess capacity, we can then do other projects.
And that's a good
from the
point.
middle of May through the middle of August, that comes first.
Well, and that also goes back to when you're talking about the classroom and the learning spaces itself. Usually, your project or whatever your calendar said gets trumped because somebody in the academic side has said, no, this classroom is more important than whatever. So a lot of times those are the trumped things where, I'm sure you guys all did this. Yes, I have a calendar set up, and yes, that's what I hope to do. But somebody comes in and says, no, and I have to have that like, look, okay, sign off on this thing. Says you trump that decision. Let's go.
That's how we do it. Yep.
And I think that's fair, being that we are an educational institution. So I'm going to keep cracking through my list here. The additional kind of modern terms, I think, solutions. I like that one. It's very vague and sounds great. I'm not providing you, and I tell this all the time. In fact, I had somebody recently ask me this. Can you send me a list of the equipment I need to buy? No, I'm not sending anybody a list of equipment. I don't provide lists of equipment. I provide a solution. So it all comes together. Well, because if we don't, they will just go buy the stuff off that list, and then they will call in 2 weeks and be like, yes, we bought some of this stuff and some things that weren't on it. It's not working. So
where's your sense of adventure?
It's long since been killed. I took my sense of adventure and I held it under the water until it stopped kicking. I also like the term experience. I think that's one that's come up recently. I like working that in somewhere. Again, whether that's in the actual department title or the group title, or if that's in the mission statement. I think that's a good point to focus on both the experience of the students and the experience of the teachers in the space. If we're talking academic, and if we're in non-academic spaces, the experience of those in that conference room or in that multi-purpose room or in that event space or in that esports arena that Larry's building. I think that's paramount, because that's going to be, you could put in the most, as Jamie likes to say, the most whiz-bang gadgets you can that on a technical level are super cool and do exactly what we want. But if people aren't having a good experience in there, it's a failure of a project. So
I agree. I love it with the mission statement, but my brain is not tuned in. How would you use that in a title? Did you find an example? Do you have one? Just curious, because I like it. I think that fits, right?
I like experience and technology.
Yeah, learning experience and technology was the one I found, and I thought that one was
which is a really great name.
That's a great name. Someone said we'd have. I don't know where.
Do you have that written down? From. Oh, I was like, I'd like to know who was thinking about that, right?
But I got that from the internet, but I'll go ask DuckDuckGo, and they will tell me exactly who that is.
So you want like the LED department, like the learning experience development, like that's what you want. Like just go.
Yeah, I like that. You know, the one that's frustrated me lately is instructional technologist, because it's not what you think it is.
No, right? It's not.
It's more
an instructional designer.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when I first started seeing that term, instructional technologist, I'm like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
And it's not anything that has to do with us. Well, I mean, it's loosely related, but
yes. And a lot of this, like we mentioned early on, a lot of these come from what other departments may be called, and what historically your university, or for a lot of us, what our state classifications may have created, because it may have been created by, there was probably a committee of people who 40 years ago were trying to figure out how do we position all this stuff, and they go back and revisit it every few years. In fact, IU's going through that right now. System wide, where
it's an iterative process. It's never done. It's a constant. It's evolving. It's constantly changing.
Committees make the best decisions.
We had this issue where every single person in the entire department was an engineer. I'm like, well, that can't be true. So they have to go through and kind of figure that out. But
what else you got?
So the last one there on the list is, and I add this one at the end here, is, and there's 3 versions of it, is AV or audiovisual or audio video or audio visual or whatever the variation of that is. I think that's a good term if you can work that in there somewhere. The downside to that is if you don't have proper representation of academic or classroom, or, well, not classroom, but academic or instructional or learning or something, then it may give the wrong impression that you're, Justin, like you said, here comes IT just coming in to do stuff. I don't know what these guys are doing. They're just here to fix the TV. So,
and I really think what Mark said earlier is a good point that I hadn't considered yet, because I don't know why, but I like the term technology better than AV.
Yeah, I don't like
most
AV,
of these
titles.
Honest.
I think it's dated. It doesn't.
Okay.
And I agree with that now.
So talk about that for a minute. Why is AV as a term? Because that's what our industry is. Why do you think AV has that perception of being a dated term?
Because I think it gives you the impression that you're pushing around AV carts around campus, and that's all you do, and it doesn't align with how robust the technology has changed. It seems like it's just it sounds and comes off to me more as labor people. Like you're just moving things around. You're
Oh,
just
here
doing
comes
projector.
the TV hanging
Like there's
people.
no knowledge and technology, like an in-depth knowledge associated with those terms. Now, we being from within the industry, we understand that. However, at a university level, I don't think it is. I think it's this is going to sound wrong, a lesser class kind of experience, whatever.
Yes,
like it just doesn't seem to be as aligned with where organizations are moving towards.
I think our solutions are moving beyond just AV. The solutions we are providing in a classroom learning experience. And
we know that's what it is.
Yeah.
But like a lot of what we're doing is about high bandwidth data, right? And so that's what we're doing. Yes, there's the audio and visual side of that, but there's a lot more going on in that whole soup to nuts solutions we're providing than just simple A and V.
And I think it's, even if we changed our name, what's the reality that happens? I meet with a client or faculty group. They don't see us for a while. We give them an estimate. They think we're running things as a business, and then they approve the estimate. Then all of a sudden they see grunt guys showing up, tearing apart the ceilings and old projectors and installing new stuff. Hey, we're done. So they see us as labor. So even if we renamed ourselves, a lot of that stigma results in from what only the clients see. They don't see the back-end engineering design and all the process that goes into that solution.
To me, the A and the V is just it's the last mile. Like that's the thing that creates the analog environment. But like there's so much back-end stuff that happens before that final A and V happens that is really important. And if you just align with just AV, I feel like you're selling yourself short of what the work is that you're actually doing.
No, that's a good point. So it sounds like we need to have technology in there somewhere. We need to have some version of learning or academic or something. Probably not instructional, because it sounds like that term is maybe too broad and gets used in too many ways, and so it's hard to pin down. So what do we think on the learning side? What about like learning or educational, academic? It sounds like we probably want something like that somewhere in the general vicinity of a department title. So Jamie, to your question about experience, I looked up that one. So learning, experience, and technology, that's at Harvard Law School. That's where that one's from. And it looks like what they have done is they've merged to what we've been discussing. They took like, here's our AV team, and here's our instructional design and streaming and online team, and they're now all one big cohesive unit called learning, experience, and technology, which is kind of cool.
Which is awesome.
And I like that one, actually. I think it fits very well.
Let's all do that one.
Let's all copy Harvard again.
Harvard, you did it right.
Yeah, they probably had 7 committees. But the thing about the technology one that I guess it rubs me wrong, personally, because
just the term technology in there somewhere. No,
it rubs me wrong for a completely different degree, right, or a different side. At our school, the support services, computer support services, right? They rebranded them to technology support. But they didn't include us in technology support. And we're like, well, wait a minute. They do the computers, because anything outside the little black box that says Dell on it, they really don't deal with. But we deal with all of it. And that's where it goes. I guess it goes back to what we were saying all along. Yes, there's structure within IS of each university and how your names. But I really like that learning experience. Because it takes it out of just I want to get away from AV also, because when you just say AV, they think, oh, you just do projectors. Oh, you do like home theater. You're the stereo nerds from high school, right? You're the AV club from high school. You carry the cameras. And it's like, we do way more than that now. It's everything. It's from AR, VR. I mean, we cover all the aspects here on this show. So that's why I think that experience one, I really was interested in what your example of a title was, and I really like that one. So stupid Harvard.
Yeah, Harvard doing it right again, huh? Advantage of being able to throw money at things to come up with the right solution for it. So okay, and then to this last one, then I did have the AV on there on what I thought was a good term, but you guy have made a good point.
Did we convince you otherwise?
About 50%, but I still like AV for one reason, because it comes first first in the alphabet, so it's first on all the listings. But academic would have it beat, so we'll move to that. But Now, in my other list here, and I'll run through these real quick, of what I would consider maybe just outdated terms, because of all the things we've been discussing. There's more facets to it. There's much more going on. And Mark, I like the way you phrase it. Like, this is the AV is the last thing that we're doing. We have to use the AV to get the information across, but that's the last part of it. It's just the last component. So the outdated terms I've got in here, classroom. I think that one it causes issues, and I think it really limits, like we've all talked about here, the classroom guys, that's what they do. Well, but there's so much more to it. I really don't like having desktop or PC or computer in the title, and a lot of times they do lump those together. Oh, your classroom and computer support or whatever. And again, that's people who come around to fix why my email's crashing, sort of thing. And I think that's a different group. I don't like the term media or media technologies, media services, any of those, because I think they're hard to define. They're either outdated, or you get into things where you find, well, they mean multimedia. They mean creating software or delivery systems online. Or you get into school like IU has a media school, which is what has become of the journalism school. So they're using that term more holistically, in the sense we're all media because this is what we're creating, but they're on a different side. So if you say, oh, the media school, well, is that the same as media services? Now you're all confused. So I think that one, kind of like we discussed with instructional, it's an older term that maybe needs to get put out to pasture because it's hard to pin down what that means. I also don't like events, but that's my personal thing, because if you lump events under the AV or classroom or whatever that group is called, now you've got people, and Justin, you mentioned this, well, hey, we're busy doing something, I can't come help you because we're setting up for something else, and now you're pulled in all sorts of different directions. And most people or most schools have kind of separated that. They have an events team to do this, and then they have your academic support team, but sometimes they are together, and I think that's tough to have that two different directions there.
Well, and I think a lot of your bad or outdated terms that you call them, I've seen universities where the AV group is responsible for other things as well.
Oh, absolutely.
I've been where they're responsible for desktops, for media creation, and for events. And so it seems like your bad, outdated terms are just a group that isn't focused as much.
Yeah, you have like the overarching like academic technologies group, right? And then we have pillars within that, right? You have the classroom specific in that experience, the media creation group in that experience, then kind of the engineering group, it's kind of the back end broadcast thing. And then you have the technology consultation group, which is working with faculty for development. So so each one of these has its own little brand, but they're all part of that larger umbrella. But if your organization is just configured where you're just one big vessel and you're all just dumped into that, I think it gets real murky, and kind of how do you deal with the service, and how do you route inquiries, and who does what? And if you're all just kind of standing by firefighter, that's not a real good organization blueprint.
And just at the last one here, so I did add one more to our list of outdated terms. So I have moved AV, audiovisual, that over there, because again, that if that is putting too fine a point on what we're doing, we do way more than that. So maybe that's something you don't want to be. So you don't want to be AV and computer support, because now you're like, wait, which group is this? What are they doing in here? So anyway, so there's my giant list and a couple other suggestions. It sounds like our winning one is from Harvard right now on learning experience technology. I did add solutions to that, so that includes everything. We have so if you were academic experience technology solutions, it sounds like that'd be the perfect title, and people would have no idea what that means.
Your trophy is in the mail. It's coming to get you.
So, Justin, I know real quick you've been working your way through this process. Has what we've discussed informed any of that, or do you guys have a completely different take on this?
I have, that's a great question. We're kind of all over the place with this. A lot of it is hinging on, a lot of turnover and a lot of new leadership at the highest level, a new provost. And I think once the dust settles, we kind of figure out what our identity is now, or our new identity, things will start just clicking and come to play. But, definitely going to re-listen to this episode and put it in front of our whole team and let them listen to what we all think is good and bad, and what helps us identify what we do the best to the university community. Because whether we think it's good or bad doesn't matter. How do we align ourselves with what the university wants to do and inform the university that what we are doing is critical? and that we're not just banging out TVs and pulling cable. There's way more to it than that.
It starts with that mission statement.
Right.
You should be in alignment
that's a great
with
point,
that mission statement.
Identifying that mission statement should identify
what's your
what
goal?
you do, and more importantly, probably what you don't do. But then you have to get into where Jamie was discussing, like how we call our classrooms one thing, but the group another, and people, they have this internal branding so tight, you know, in their minds as far as what a classroom is, but that's not the group, so it's tough to find that. So that causes potential communication issues. So I think it's all part of a larger discussion of, you know, in 2021, what should a department be called? And it sounds like, with the exception of potentially this team at Harvard Law School, no one has it 100% right. We all have aspects and bits and pieces of it, but it's not a fit dead on for anybody.
I mean, we're AV services just because that fit with what other departments are named within IT. Network services, right? You know, we're right beside them. That's what they're still named. Yeah, kind of fits. I
mean, I do want to call out a couple that I think were you know, kind of moving in the right direction. Collaboration and classroom technologies. I'm not a big fan of the term classroom in there, but I like that they got collaboration in there because that identifies kind of an additional service they provide. The ones that have experience in there, that was, I guess, just Harvard. But looking through our list here, we have a lot of AV, a lot of audio visual, a lot of classroom, a lot of learning environment. So,
you know, something else.
Go ahead.
You know, we facilitate communication with the things that we do, right? That's kind of primarily all we do. Facilitate information and communication back and forth. So why can't we be the facilitating, communicating department on campus?
Oh, you mean phones?
Does that make sense?
You're just doing
Does that
phones?
sound good?
You guys just,
By the way, I failed at marketing, so ignore that completely. That's
a good point, Mark. If you're the facilitating communications group,
that sounds like phones to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully this has been enlightening. I think it's been helpful for me anyway to kind of talk through this. Like I said, you guys convinced me on at least one point. I thought AV was, I want AV in there, but nope, that means something to me. That doesn't mean something to everybody else out there. I think I will throw this entire list. Unfortunately, as Jamie pointed out, I did not put the schools that it's related to, but a lot of them are in multiple schools. But I'll put this list in the show description. You guys can look at that. Hopefully that's been informative for some of you out there maybe going through and struggling with the same thing, especially in this
Let us know. Yeah, let us know if we got it wrong, though. If we are just completely wrong, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you just went through this process and say, hey, 6 months ago, we just rebranded as desktop and classroom support, tell us why.
We love it. It's working great. Like, we want to hear about it.
And it may make perfect sense for you at your institution, but I'm just looking at it from the kind of the larger higher ed AV perspective, though. All right, Mark, let's push that commercial button again.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So, here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
All right, so as we teased early on, as Jamie just reminded me, we're going to talk about giving power to the people in our classrooms and conference rooms. And what I mean by that is, and Mark, I believe this was your question that you posed a couple of weeks ago. We were meeting and talking about potential topics to discuss. And you said, you know, when we on the touch panel or on the button panel, there's a button there that says power off. What does that really mean? Because we're not turning everything off. In most cases, we're leaving, actually the vast majority of stuff is still on and still on at full power. It may go to a slightly lower power draw state. You know, big items like a projector or a direct view display may quote unquote power down, but they're still powered on. They still have power to them because we need them for remote management or for remote support, that sort of thing. So the question is, you know, when we tell people that we're powering things off, you know, what stuff are we actually powering off? I mean, what is that actually doing? Or are we just leaving things cooking 24/7? Because honestly, we know if it's on 24/7, you know, your main classroom AV switcher is sitting there running 24/7 because it needs to be. So that way, when someone goes to route something, it comes up right away. Otherwise, it takes 5 or 7 minutes for that thing to boot fully. But when we have that button that says power, what's actually happening there? So, Mark, I'll turn it over to you since this was your
So I think
thought.
we have to kind of go back in the Wayback Machine a little bit here. There was the days where we had systems that needed to have a very specific sequence of powering on, power off, or things just were not happy, with the component-driven days. And a lot of that's changed, right? We are not necessarily powering on, powering off, hard powering, literally removing the power cable from these devices anymore. But yet we still have that turning system off. And my take on this is, I'm curious of, are people still, for lack of a better term, unplugging the power on their devices? And then we kind of have the power on, power off. But also, what do you need to have remote power conditioning, sequencing, things like that? So what are you doing? And my perspective on this is from our support desk, primarily. Because I think, Chris, if you go down what you said, you're like, oh, I don't need to turn this off ever. Somebody, if it's not yourself or whoever it is going to design you a system and put zero power maintenance whatsoever in a design. And they're going to say, oh, well, it's just designed to be running 24/7. And everybody on this call right now and everybody driving and pissed off sitting in traffic knows damn well, if you have something just plugged in 24/7 and it's never going to power sequence, you're going to have a problem and you're going to be on the top of a ladder somewhere power sequencing that at some point. And so how are you managing this? And so does everybody kind of have IP-enabled power sequencing, or do some people just run Wild West, plug it into an outlet, hope for the best? So I'm just kind of throwing it out there. Want to see what.
Oh, I know which camp Justin's in. Go for it.
So go. So just chime in.
Here's what we're doing. It's our policy that we flip the toggle switch on the projector after class.
Who's we?
What?
Unpack that for me.
I'm just joking. Jamie's
Wait,
going.
Are you going room to room with like 2 yardsticks taped together? Like
Yeah, it's a policy.
Switch?
And if you don't do it, the instructor gets fired.
Oh man, that's sweet.
That's not the craziest thing I've heard.
Do it, Larry. Don't say it.
I've actually been at a satellite campus where the projector was on the light switch. It was on the same circuit, so whenever you hit the light switch, the projector would die immediately.
Nice.
Yeah, we've had that. God. We've had to do renovations and fix that, but.
Well, and I think we've dealt with. I mean, I remember years ago someone complaining the microphone never works in this room. No, microphone never works. And you go in and look, and the old they were Shure microphones at the time that had a rocker switch on the front of the mic receiver, and someone would dutifully at the end of class,
turn it off.
They would see there's a green light, click, power off. Well, the next person comes in, the mic's broken. Well, yes, because it turned it off. So it was this like weird thing. Someone's trying to do the right thing, but they're actually causing more difficulty than it's worth to do that. So. Power is a tricky thing. If the switch is available, it can cause more problems than you think it might solve by turning it off. So
yeah, I mean, we leave most everything on, but I will say that this is specifically about classrooms, right? Because the larger systems that we design in stadiums, those are sequenced off. The amps are off, but amps don't turn off in classrooms for the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but also amps in classrooms are now
off,
very good at low power. So
they're small and
our power off in our classrooms basically shuts off the projector, raises the screen, and resets everything back to a default.
Standby.
It puts the projector in standby. That's my point.
Standby mode.
Yeah, standby. Yeah.
I want to hear breakers flipping. I hit system off. I want to hear whack, 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 whack.
Everything
That's
else
why we just flip
is
the toggle
always
switches.
Up.
It's easier.
Yeah.
We just run everything. It's all in standby. Right, that's our power off standard. I've looked at having a remote controlled sequencer of some sort. Never have, because it was an extra device I've got to keep track of, and usually by the time we find out that it is a power problem, you're already in the room anyway, so it wasn't worth it. And my biggest power problem this moment is PoE. Because
that's a good point.
I have a very
on my list
liberal.
It's on my list.
I have a very liberal networking group that allows me to do a lot of things, but I don't get to manage switch ports, right?
Exactly.
And so if I have a PoE issue, it's
control
either
the power supply for that switch. Bang!
Yeah.
Look at that.
Well, but that's 10 minutes, right? And I think that's a problem with some of these. And there's some very well-known Tron all-in-wonders that it's 10, 15 minutes for that sucker to come back up,
it's not
reinitialize,
that bad, but it's
and
7 minutes. But
It used to be. It's not that bad anymore. Now, I do
that's
have
because
the
I don't
remote
buy them
power.
anymore.
I do have the remote power on ours, but the biggest thing that has given me is the ability to know whether the PC's on without asking the instructor in the middle of class.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, oh, your your computer isn't on. Please turn it on.
Yeah, so Jamie, you said like the PoE, and you're going right down the road where I set this trap and you walked right into it. So thank you. Is that how many of your devices are PoE?
I feel used.
They get hung up if they're sitting there, and so that service call. My touch panel is non-responsive. It's not working. How are you dealing with that? Are you trying to fix it in this moment, or is that ticket in? We'll get to it after class. Like, so that happens. And
we
for
just
things
call
that we've
network
seen,
engineers and just let them know.
Well, yeah. So we ran into a similar thing where we were using the little the immersive solstice boxes, which can run on PoE, but they get real finicky on PoE. And like you said, Mark, they sit there long enough and they go into this weird state where they have power, and you can even see them on the network, but they're not like fully activating. But because it's PoE, you either have to reboot the switch, which depending on where we are, good luck with that. Or B, we've been putting local power supplies on our IP-enabled power controllers so we can reboot them, because so many of these things, you think it's a simple room. I got a display on the wall. I put this box behind it. I'm done. Well, I can't get to that device or network port because it's behind an 85-inch monitor.
Right.
So now I got to put another device in there to be able to physically reboot those, so I don't have to take the thing off the wall. So 6 one, half dozen the other, I guess, on that.
So yeah, for us, it may look odd, but we'll have PoE power supplies localized in our rack. And yet I know I can hang it off of core network, but I lose the ability to power cycle that. And the campus is so large, if they can't turn a system on, for lack, call that on whatever state you want it to be, how many hours of wasted education time is there? Like, our students can go in to our power sequencing and just power cycle a touch panel or a button panel or even a processor, because it's on a single outlet. We have it labeled at a web page. They can get there and do that. And to me, this is kind of a buyer beware. And I don't know how many people out there do have the credential to get in and manage network port stuff on their switches. Maybe if through more unification, we'll all get there. But keeping those oddball things from happening and giving our support desk the ability to mitigate that, like on the fly, is really valuable. But you have to design specifically for that. And
yes,
be
you have
very
to be very deliberate about it. Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
if you just kind of throw those in, I have a bad habit of putting all the stuff in there, designing it out, but then in the actual installation, I don't actually label the port. So you can log into that power supply and you say, hey, you got outlets 1 through 8. Like,
we have full templates that get deployed on them before they even go out.
I have had our network crew, it was certain devices that were troublesome and maybe you can't reach them without a 40-foot ladder or some stupid thing, where there's a nightly routine that cycles the PoE for 5 minutes at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's very few and far between, but I mean, that's the one thing I've had to do a workaround. Otherwise, I don't typically have an issue, but I know when I do, because oh boy, it's a pain in the ass. And I think that's where we're going here, is that boy.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Jamie. Would you feel comfortable pulling the power on any other device every night and plugging it back in after 5 minutes? Because that would make me nervous that all those cold...
No, so these are like endpoint devices, right? And so anything that has a massive amount of intelligence, an audio DSP, some of these modern VG, a network switch, even the AV over IP master head-ins. No. But these are for instance, the Bird Dog Minis, right? And I might have one of these stuck up there. And at some point, no, I don't have an issue with that. And it may not be every night, right? Usually by the time I've put in this request to my network folks, there's a rhythm. Like, I know every 2 weeks. So maybe it's Saturday night, at 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
But I have had a few of those, but not very many. And they're always in places where I have to have like some kind of cherry picker to get to. But I don't have a great way to go around the PoE, because I really want things on a managed, serviceable network that I can, so I give up that control. But if I put them on my own PoE generator, then I have, I'm basically having another infrastructure. And it's like that show we did 2 months ago, right? AV over IP. And the core stuff anymore, anything plugged into 110, I think we all have the same answer for. But that's the weird stuff. And it does get strange.
So then the other kind of piece of this to me is like, I don't know how your universities are, your campuses, or your power infrastructure, the building wide or campus wide. We are forever having power turned off to buildings for maintenance and steam tunnel this, steam tunnel that. Like, we literally need to go in advance and turn off a lot of things. And we'll get a thing from maintenance. Hey, this building's gonna be without power for, Saturday, Sunday, and they give it the blast. So if we had to go out every time and go unplug all of these stations and everything like that, how do you manage
we
that?
We let it roll. We get an announcement that power's going out in the building.
You just let it ride.
Okay, it resets everything, and it'll come back on, and we'll get a ticket.
But usually there's a little bit of brown power on both sides of that.
Yeah.
And that's the hard
part that scares me.
I think that goes back to that scale, because let's face it, Oregon State, 3 times the size of UMKC, right? So we get that announcement. It's nothing for us to. I mean, it only happens maybe every other month. So 6 times a year, right?
Jamie, you're saying this because you don't have to physically do it. There's other people.
Yeah,
well, I usually don't.
Sneaker
No problem for me. I just tell them to go do it.
Yeah, hey, just go do it. But I see your point too, that if we were 3 times the size, that does become a big burden, a labor burden, and it makes the decision different. But for us, even if if it's one building, I'm only talking 15 rooms, and we can knock it out in an hour. So, that's that scale thing as well.
And Jamie, you're over 50% the size of OSU. Just heads up.
Yeah, and I back at Butler, we knew which projectors did not handle a brownout very well, and we would go hit those rooms. But the majority of our campus would be fine over like a winter break or a tornado warning or something, and we would leave those alone. But we had about 50 rooms or so that we knew we had to protect, or we would be buying bulbs.
Yeah,
you shut things off
if there
for a
was a big one
tornado?
over the weekend, there was a couple times where we would go unplug everything.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Well, what about
not the warning? He's talking about for power. Yeah.
What about this?
Yeah. So
you were thinking the tests.
I'm like,
every Thursday, yank the power.
The warning is given about 35 seconds before your ass is being blown in a circle.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, you guys are quick. It's like you have way too many people and you're super fast.
No, we've had a lot of them where we knew a big one was coming on the weekend, and we would just proactively go through and protect the bulbs of the ones that did not handle it.
So
lasers.
I'll also say we've been approached from building management and campus management about green initiatives and what can we do to save energy for the university and for campuses that may be located in high energy cost locations where they're very mindful of every kilowatt being used. We had measurement coming in and they were measuring loads of classrooms. And like, if you were to turn all of these 100 classrooms off, we would save the university this amount of money. And but this stuff's coming. So this level of conversation is happening. And so when you start talking about this scale, it's a lot of energy across the state that's being used, and that's real dollars that does add up. And so somebody listening to this is probably in a situation where they've been asked to turn things off, completely off, no vampire power whatsoever in the system every night. And I know it exists because we're being asked to do that. Not saying that we are doing that, but it's quite literally somebody's living this reality right now.
And that's where you change the number on the top of the lectern to the VP for facilities phone number, and you say, when this doesn't work the next morning, call that guy.
Yeah, that's completely legit, because it was a few years ago, I had to do a LEED certified gold, and I had to prove the power usage of every single device and on and off state.
Ooh,
and
really?
I mean, it did become very burdensome. Now, luckily, modern equipment in the standby state is it's that vampire, it's a trickle. But the computers, on the other hand, they used to let the Dell computers just blow through, and they don't do that anymore. There's a overnight script that runs, shuts them down, wake on land the next morning, but there's 8 hours every night those things don't run. And they've asked us to do the same thing, but then when they started seeing the loads in standby, they allowed it to flow. So I didn't have to put in the external power switches and things, because that return on investment, right? So we can shut this down and you're going to save a couple of bucks, but when it doesn't work tomorrow, you're going to spend a couple of bucks to get it going again. So When does it equal out? But that was something I hadn't thought of until you brought that up. I'm like, yeah, a couple of years ago I did have to do that.
Well, and Jamie, you raised a good point there that in recent years, so many of the AV devices have made huge leaps in the low power state. I mean, I see power supplies now. You look at their draw on idle, it's like 0.1 watts sort of thing. They're using almost nothing. It's basically enough to run the LED on the top that says, I have power, but I'm not doing anything with it.
Yeah, phone chargers. Yeah, phone chargers, the stupid wallboard phone chargers actually suck more power than most of our equipment does.
Mm-hmm.
Or like we were talking about, like the giant all-in-wonder, a DMPS style device that when it's on full tilt, it's using a couple hundred watts there, but when it's in idle, it's using 10 or 12 sort of thing. And no, those start to add up if you add up an entire rack of gear. But it sounds like it's easy to make, not easy, but it's at least worth making that argument of, hey, here's what our room is at full tilt, and here's what our room system is at 100% idle at 3 a.m, and you can see we're not pulling a whole lot. So
yeah, you got to make that data right, and so you got to put it together somehow. And but also there's kind of the both sides. So there's the servicing side, then there's the cost savings over the life of it versus the wear and tear. And so interesting topic, because we kind of go through it a lot because we're constantly looking at our power templates. And I don't know how many of you have specific power designs in your standards, but we have a power design that is part of it, and kind of things get plugged into these IP enabled outlets because this is how it ties in specifically to our support infrastructure. So good conversation.
Yeah, and to your earlier question, Mark, so we do IP-enabled power control whenever possible, wherever possible. And we'll make deliberate decisions on, well, these devices don't matter so much, so they can be on not a surge protector, but a straight power strip. So there's no additional surge on there, but that can all be fed off of one outlet. So there's ways to do that, to manage that stuff for exactly that reason, that remote access. I can log in, see what's going on. If I do need to shut stuff down, I can, sort of thing. So it makes good sense. So to those of you out there listening, if you're not using the Middle Atlantic R-Link or a Watt box, or Atlas IED has a really nice series of IP-enabled power conditioners, or power controllers rather. Definitely go look at those and start thinking about those in your designs, because it can make life a heck of a lot easier. And yes, it's an extra $200 or $300 on every project, but it can save your bacon when you have to go pull a whole bunch of 85-inch monitors off the wall to get to the little wireless device, which is in some sort of weird PoE state again. It's definitely worth looking into. Absolutely. So, well, I think that's about it for us.
If you don't cable management, it just falls out the bottom. It's easy.
Well, there you go.
Do that too. Then you can always get to it.
It's wireless.
Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.